Hey everybody, Jake Thorne here with Texas A&M AgriLife Sheep and Goat Extension. Hey, if you have been a follower of our page, you know that we really believe in the value of genetic information, particularly estimated breeding values from the National Sheep Improvement Program. This type of information allows for us to select animals for traits that are really hard to measure through just visual appraisal. But that doesn't mean that visual appraisal needs to be completely set to the wayside either. So easily one of the top questions that we get about EBVs from the National Sheep Improvement Program is how to prioritize them against other traits that we can see. And so we're going to do a little fun exercise today. I've actually got 4 rams over here to the right, and we're going to take a look at these rams, but I've also got their actual estimated breeding value information. And so we're going to go through each of these bucks, we're going to look at them, we're going to look at their data, and then we're going to talk about maybe how we would select them, either from a judging standpoint where we've got 4 animals like in a judging contest, or if you were just a producer that was out purchasing a commercial Dorper ram for your own operation. So I want to talk about some of the data we've got really quick. So obviously there's going to be 4 bucks and they're going to be numbered 1 through 4. They've got some chalk marks across their back to help you kind of see that. And then I've got some trait data here. And so each of these headings represents a different estimated breeding values, but some of them kind of correlate to one another. For instance, WWT and PWWT, those are indicators of growth. And so WWT actually stands for weaning weight, and really that is influenced by how well that animal grows while it's with its dam. And so that's really heavily influenced by the milking ability and maternal ability of the dam. So that goes into that trait. Post-weaning weight is how well an animal grows after it's been weaned, obviously. And so that's really a true genetic measurement of growth. PFAT and PEMD, those are carcass traits, and so this is post-weaning fat depth and post-weaning eye muscle depth. And then over here we've got NLW, number lambs weaned, and so that's more of a reproductive indicator, and PFEC, post-weaning fecal egg count. And this is an EBV that measures parasite resistance. And so we've got a lot of different things to balance here. And these numbers, admittedly, either in a judging contest or if you go to a sale that has estimated breeding values, can be a little bit overwhelming. And so I want to talk about what they represent and how we can sort of prioritize them based off of your needs as either the judge or a sheep operation owner. And so these numbers for our growth indicators, they actually represent kilograms. And so when we see a plus 5.6, that would mean that offspring of ram 1 would be expected to be 5.6 pounds heavier than what was originally breed standard, which was 5.6 kilograms. I said pounds, it's kilograms, against what was originally breed average, which was 0. Same with post-weaning weight. This represents a kilogram number versus breed average. So we would want higher numbers for these 2 traits would be preferable. This fat depth represents millimeters, okay? And so depending on your priorities, whether you're looking at this ram from a carcass standpoint where you would prefer leaner carcasses, or if you would like members of your flock to actually carry more condition, that really depends on if you'd like a negative or a positive number for fat depth. For eye muscle depth, generally we would like larger. That just represents a heavier muscled animal. And so again, this is in millimeters, so a plus 0.4 would be offspring of this ram would be expected to have loin eye or eye muscle that's 0.4 millimeters deeper. Not a whole lot. NLW is actually representative of a percentage. So daughters of this ram would be expected to have 3% more lambs weaned. Again, versus an average which was originally set at 0. And then post-weaning fecal egg count is again another percentage. Offspring of this ram would be expected to have 7% lower fecal egg counts, or theoretically less parasites than breed average. And so we want usually a negative number for this fecal egg count. And then for everything else, maybe save the fat, we usually want higher numbers. And so it's a balancing act. Now over time in the breed, what has been considered average has changed. And so across the bottom here, I've got what is now actually the Dorper average. And so we'll compare these rams against their breed average. But before we do that, let's take a look at the rams. And so thanks to Eddie here, he's going to help. we're going to turn these bucks loose one at a time and give you a chance to look at them, and I'm going to talk about them just a little bit, what we see phenotypically, and then again we'll balance that against some of their EBVs. So let's go ahead and turn out ram number 1. Okay, to give you a little bit of background about this ram and all of the rams that you're going to see here, these are just a commercial, or I shouldn't say commercial, these are a crossbred Dorper, white Dorper flock. And so you've got this painted pattern, and obviously in a purebred scenario, that painted color maybe isn't as preferable, but we're going to go through some scenarios where we can maybe disregard that color and look at some other traits that this buck has going for him. So when I look at this ram just visually, there are some things to like, absolutely. This is a masculine buck. He's heavy boned, he's got big testicles, he's powerful, and so those are all things that we would really like the sire to supply in a breeding scenario. He's pretty slick haired, which is also ideal. Now for a show ring type situation, he maybe isn't the most level across his top or the most level out of his hip, but we really think, and we're going to talk about this data and this information more of a sense in the sense of the commercial industry. And so for a commercial ram, he's pretty good. Okay? Let's see how well he likes to go over here by himself. Okay, ram number 2. Okay, immediately this buck isn't as painted. He's more of the kind of the traditional black-headed. He does have some black up on his shoulder, but especially compared to that ram that we just saw a second ago, the first thing that hits me about this ram is he's kind of tall and long, which may have some good things, but that's a much larger framed ram. But when we get more of a view from up front and from behind, we can say that he's probably a little narrower made, not quite as muscular as that previous buck. He's a little lighter boned. It's hard to tell on the video, but structurally, this buck, you can see that he's a little long pastern, and maybe his hooves and his feet aren't quite shaped as ideal. And so immediately there are some concerns for me on this buck as we start to look at him. Okay. Ram number 3. Okay, another painted buck comes out. Here's a pretty moderate framed ram, but immediately I'm taken by the fact that he's really big bodied. Again, another really wide constructed, muscular buck, fairly masculine, heavy footed, heavy boned. Again, another ram that maybe is just a little sloped out of his hip or maybe not perfect in his top line, but in terms of traits and physical attributes that will really allow him to survive and do well out in a low input, more extensive operation, there's a lot of things to like. All of these rams actually are coming right off of grass. They've had very little supplement over the last year. We know that it's been very dry here in San Angelo in west central Texas for several months now. And so with no supplement out on dry, dormant grass, this guy is in really great condition. You can tell that he's deep flanked, deep bodied. That's a ram that, again, we like a lot of things about. Okay, number 4 here. Number 4 comes out, another buck that's colored more like what our number 2 ram was. Maybe a little bit lighter weight ram compared to the others. One that is just a little smaller framed. Another one that maybe doesn't have quite as much muscle or masculinity or power as a couple of the other rams that we've seen today. Another one too, structurally, off of his rear leg there. He wants to kind of bow out of his hock, as you can see him walking away. one that maybe doesn't really come very square to the ground. Again, I think when we start to look at these rams for physical or visual traits, I think there's two that we really like a lot of things about, and then there's two that we have some major concerns with. And so let's look at them all together again one more time. And I want to show you some of their breeding values too. And so again, hopefully you can see with the chalk marks on their back, but they're numbered 1, 2, 3, and then the buck without chalk on its back, that represents ram number 4. And so actually when you go to a judging contest or you go to a ram sale, probably what the information that you're going to have first is their breeding value or their genetic data. And so this might be what you first evaluate before you even look at the animals. And so let's look at this and what kind of stands out. And so again, I've got breed average for Dorpers across the bottom, and then I've got all these different EBVs. And I want you, again, to think about what might be most important to you or and what are traits that maybe we don't have to prioritize quite as high. And so let's, just for fun, put a scenario on this. Let's say that you are a commercial ram buyer. You've got a crossbred hair sheep flock at home, just a commercial operation, and you're looking to buy a ram, obviously to service those ewes, and all of your male offspring are going to be sold at weaning. The females, you're going to retain those till they're a year old, and then at that point you'll keep, let's say, half of those females as replacements in your own flock, and then the other half will be sold as just yearling ewes to other producers. And so I think that, and let's say that that scenario or that operation is in San Angelo, Texas. And I think that that is a very real world, realistic type of situation. Now, what would be important in that scenario? Well, the male offspring are going to be sold at weaning, and that's where the big paycheck is going to come from initially. And so weaning weight and really growth, just in general, is something that we want to emphasize. Also, those females are going to be ran for an entire year. That's going to include a summer season where parasites might be somewhat of an issue. So fecal egg count, that's something that's going to be important in this flock. Also, if those members that are retained in the flock, we're going to want to retain some form of parasite resistance. Now, we are in San Angelo, Texas, and parasites aren't a huge problem every year here, but every other or every third year, there's something that are a major concern. If this operation was in East Texas, I would say that fecal egg count and parasite resistance would be really, really critical. And so that's something to consider. Obviously, we're going to be retaining our own replacements in our flock, so we want some reproductive value too. So that's something not to ignore. Now, I will say, though we're provided with this carcass data, and we never want to fully ignore any traits. We would actually like animals that are balanced across their entire EBV profile. I would say in this type of situation, carcass information is maybe not as critical. So we can look at this, but I would not say that this is priority number one. And so when I look at the data here, some things that really stand out to me right from the get-go are that we've got a couple bucks that are below 0 for fecal egg count, and so that's great. And then we have one that is quite a bit higher. Again, 0 is breed average. We have all rams, there's some variation, but all rams are above breed average for number of lambs weaned, so that's great. When we look at our growth and our carcass data, we have some individuals that are at or above breed average and some that are below. And so how do we balance that? Well, I think if you turn around and you look at this, you like this number of lambs weaned here, but for this ram number 2, he's below average. He's the lowest and the lowest and below average for weaning weight. He's one of the lowest post-weaning weight, and he's easily the highest for fecal egg count. That's that number 2 ram that we didn't necessarily like a whole lot visually to. I think that's a ram that if you're a buyer would not be interested in, or if you're in a judging class, that is a ram that probably goes to the bottom of the class. Yes, there are some good things about him. He's the highest number of lambs weaned, but we want balance, and in this scenario, he doesn't provide a whole lot else. Next thing that pops out to me is that we've got a ram down here in number 4 that it's negative for fecal egg count. That's good. He's one of the better ones for number of lambs weaned, and just kind of average for growth. But So when we look at the paper, there's some good things there. But when we looked at that ram phenotypically, and that's this number 4 buck right here, I think that that's one that really stands out for being quite a bit lighter muscled, quite a bit less powerful, less masculine, a little smaller testicled. And so even though he's got pretty decent data, that is a ram that I would have some visual concerns with. And so maybe he's not a keeper either. And so that leaves us with the 2 painted rams who visually were powerful, muscular, better conditioned. One of those bucks was a lot bigger middled. One of them was really big-footed and heavy boned. And so there's a lot of things to like visually. And then we look at their paper. There's some good and bad things, but there's nothing that's truly terrible. And that's important. Remember I said we want balance. And so ram number 1, right across the top here, he's one of the lowest fecal egg count. Sure, he's a little bit lower than the others for number of lambs weaned, but he's still above breed average. And so we're not going to fault him too much there. He is the highest for weaning weight. That's a great thing. He's also the highest for post-weaning weight, so we'd expect a lot of growth from the offspring of these rams, or from this ram. He's one of the best ones for fecal egg count, so there's a lot of things to like there. I did mention that we want to briefly look at his carcass data. He is the lowest for eye muscle depth, which is a little surprising when you look at him. But again, I don't necessarily think that this carcass information needs to be priority number 1. We like what he looks like. We like his combination of growth and potential parasite resistance. That is a ram that's in the top pair in a judging contest, or maybe one that you would want to buy if you're a commercial buyer. And then the next one would be this ram number 3. Okay, another buck that is comparable in terms of his weaning weight and post-weaning growth. Another ram that is one of the lower ones for number of lambs weaned, but again, still above 0. Very comparable to ram number 1. And he is positive for fecal egg count. And maybe in a judging contest, that's a deciding factor if you were going to try to split between those 2 rams. But the fact that he's just barely above 0, and again, I'm in our scenario, particularly where I said we're in San Angelo, parasites aren't a constant problem, I'd say we can maybe live with that and still use that ram in the top pair of this judging class, or be one to purchase. Because those 2 bucks, those 2 painted rams, are certainly ones that have a lot of things going for them, both genetically and visually. In a judging scenario, I would say maybe the ram number 1 is the safer bet to start the class and go 1 over 3. But that's a very close pair in my opinion. If you're a commercial ram buyer, maybe your best bet is just buy both of those bucks and buy with some confidence because of their data, because of the information that we've got here about them. And then, like I said, there's a lot of things to like looking at them. So hopefully this was helpful. This is one of our longer videos that we've posted. And I know that it's probably going to garner some more questions. Don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask us. This is an exercise that maybe we'd like to do a couple times. We've got some chance to pick out some keeper ewe lambs here coming up in the next couple months as well. And so maybe we'll try to do something like this again. So again, hope this was helpful. Have a great day.